Zen at the Sharp End. Welcome to the podcast about how to turn difficult people and relationships into your best teachers. I'm Mark Westmackett, a Zen Buddhist teacher, mindfulness teacher, and ex-professional astronomer. This is a podcast to go along with my book, Zen and the Art of Dealing with Difficult People. In each episode, we'll be exploring different varieties of people, relationships, and situations that we find irritating, difficult, or painful. Together with a number of Zen friends, I'll be discussing how the practices of Buddhism and mindfulness can help us see our difficult people as troublesome Buddhas, our greatest teachers. In my podcast, you've heard about how many others have learnt to deal with difficult people and conflict. Are you interested in exploring this for yourself and applying that wisdom to your own life? Well, in July I'll be running a Zen retreat all around conflict. Conflict generally, and more specifically in our personal relationships. The retreat will centre around 3 Zen koans, which will be our guides in exploring this area, and how to motivate our actions from a deeper sense of understanding and compassion. The retreat will be at Whaley Hall in Derbyshire in the UK. It'll be suitable for all, from beginners to Zen and meditation, to those with a more established sitting practice. We'll be following the schedule of a formal Zen retreat, and our time together will be held in silence, except for within a couple of the practices and the discussion. There's no fixed cost for this retreat, other than the accommodation fee, just a suggested donation of around £100. To find out more, follow the link in the episode notes. This podcast is sponsored by Zen Minded. If you get a chance, check them out at www.zenminded.uk. You'll find a curated selection of Japanese homeware and incense, a perfect match to your meditation practice. We're also sponsored by BetterHelp. BetterHelp offers convenient and affordable therapy online. In my opinion, meditation and psychotherapy both offer valuable avenues for exploring our suffering, habits, and stuck areas. A while back I spent 3.5 years meeting twice a week with a psychotherapist when things had become acute, and it felt like the help he gave me was really transformational, especially when supported by my regular meditation practice. If you're interested, they've extended an offer of 10% off your first month of therapy at betterhelp.com/Zen at the Sharp End. That's betterhelp, HELP.com/Zen at the Sharp End. In this podcast, I interviewed Claralynn Nunamaker. Claralynn's life has taken her on a variety of paths towards Buddhism, through an early interest in Chinese philosophy and Chan Buddhism, to the Theravada tradition and learning Pali, the language of the Buddha, to the jhana practice taught by Lee Brasington. Over the years, she has extensively studied and taught Marshall Rosenberg's system of non-violent communication, which she sees as the embodied practice of right speech. Here, Claralynn insightfully explains the practice of non-violent communication and its foundation in the universal attitudes of kindness, compassion and empathy. Her view is that non-violent communication gives us the tools to transform the aspiration of right speech into reality through clear, learnable techniques and principles, something we all need, I'd say. Through various personal examples, she explores the concept of the enemy image in non-violent communication, basically the equivalent of the troublesome Buddha, and how we can shift from describing an enemy image into identifying and acknowledging our feelings and our needs. And when we identify the needs that are not being met, she says, that allows us to draw alongside the difficult people we meet and see their Buddha nature. Hello and welcome, Claralynn. Thank you so much for joining us today on our podcast Zen at the Sharp End. It's really great to have you here.
Thanks for inviting me. It's great to be here, Mark.
So maybe the best place to get started then is just if you tell us a little bit about your background, your sort of context, and where you what paths you've taken in your life that have brought you to here right now.
Yeah, well, it's a bit eclectic. I mean, I started out in the suburbs of Chicago, which seems kind of unlikely. But I had a real affinity with China, which started to manifest in university days. Really resonated with the Tao Te Ching when I found that. So that was kind of my first spiritual landing place, because I was raised without religion. So I would say the Tao Te Ching was my first landing place spiritually.
And
But I was
when
very
do you remember when you first encountered that book?
Oh, it was in Santa Cruz because I escaped from the suburbs of Chicago and went to university in Santa
Ah,
Cruz, and the whole world seemed to open up in Santa Cruz, including the Tao Te Ching.
right. Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
So,
mm,
so I studied Chinese and spent a couple of years teaching English in China. I was just very curious about Buddhism, but never kind of found a way to explore it until I was in my 30s, and I had a choice to move to two different cities, and one had a Chinese temple in it, the city of 10,000 Buddhas in Ukiah, California, and I thought, well, let me move there so that I can finally explore Buddhism. And it was very tentative initially. But when I heard the Kalama Sutta, that's the one where the Buddha says, Kalamas, you're doubtful about a doubtful matter, and don't take anything because the guru says it or it appears to
mm,
your logic. But when you know for yourselves that these things are good and wholesome and not censored for the wise, then do you accept them and follow them. And I can remember literally thinking, this is robust, like scientific
mm,
robust. This is asking me to believe nothing. This is asking me to run the experiment for myself. I can get on board with this. And that's the moment I started calling myself a Buddhist.
mm,
So I practiced in that Chinese tradition for, I'd say, a couple of years. That monastery had a sister relationship with Abhayagiri, with the Theravada Forest Sangha in Northern California. So I also started practicing there, really gravitated to the Forest Sangha, practiced with them pretty seriously until 2009. Then, events, I just found events in 2009 very difficult, left that tradition pretty much. I still supported the nuns, but it really rocked my practice. And it took about 5 years to get back on track. And when I did get back on track, it was okay, let me learn Pali so I can go back to what the Buddha actually taught and try to
mm,
read it without any intermediaries. Um, and then that became my path. And then I did a retreat with Lee Brasington, who teaches jhanas. That was in
mm.
2015, and that blew open my meditation practice. So between Lee and following Polly, that really got me back on track. And then I started practicing nonviolent communication. And about that time, I started really framing it in terms of practice, in terms of the practice of right speech, because I had trouble maintaining a solo meditation practice at home,
Mm,
as many of
mm,
us do. In a group, no problem. At home, individually, just excruciating. And I thought, well, rather than beat myself up for that, why don't I just acknowledge the truth of it and put my energy where the juice is? And the juice was with nonviolent communication, and I really started to see that as right speech, and then eventually started teaching that kind of a blend of nonviolent communication and right speech.
right. 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 Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it seems like one of those things that's so aligned with what's taught in all of Buddhist practice around. Whenever you encounter anything about right speech, it just says nonviolent communication right across it. Yet I
Right.
understand that nonviolent communication did not come out of a Buddhist background, and it was evolved kind of separately. What would you say are the main principles of nonviolent communication?
Yeah, well, it's pretty interesting because I remember seeing Marshall Rosenberg when he gave a retreat up in Findhorn, and he was talking about how he traveled the world teaching nonviolent communication. And somebody walked up to him and he said, "Yeah, Marshall, this is great. This is applied Judaism." And he laughed. The guy said, "Why are you laughing?" He said, "Well, yesterday I was talking to someone who was telling me it was applied Islam." And of course, I was sitting there in the audience, and I'd been thinking, "This is applied Buddhism." Yeah. So the principles are universal, and
Mm,
it's kindness, it's compassion, it's being able to really have true empathy, step in another's shoes, the look for the underlying humanity in the other person, rather than getting tripped up on words that trigger you. But what is the underlying humanity that we share?
mm,
And the beauty of it is it helps us transform an aspiration to do that into practical, learnable tools that you can apply.
mm, mm, mm.
And I want to go back just a bit with my Buddhist path, just to say that at this point, I consider myself an early Buddhist, not in a scholastic sense. People get into all kinds of arguments about, what's an early text, what's not.
Right.
And that's less interesting to me than just going back to what smells like an early text in terms of the language, the Pali and the teaching, and just try to put that into practice. So
Mm.
that's
So,
where I've ended
so
up.
what's it been like then, learning Pali and then reading the old sutras in the original language?
Oh,
I've never done that. What's it?
yeah. After my first Pali class, I went to my meditation group and I was teaching them just some basic things. And there was a woman who said, she was really getting it. She said, "Wow, it's like the whole thing just pops into 3D."
Ah.
And I've always thought that's such a good way to describe it, because what happens is with, Pali is related to Sanskrit, right?
Mm.
And and in both languages, you get these multiple meanings of words. And the best way to think of it is like in poetry in English. If you have something that can be taken two or three different ways, you can really delight in that, right? You don't get tripped up on, well, which one is it? But you see, this is what we do with translation. We go, which one is it? But when you roll it back to the Pali, and if you roll it back even further to the Sanskrit roots, you get revealed these layers of meaning that, you can look at it this way or you can look at it this way, and they're all correct. So learning the language gives this richness. And then my experience is the the impact on practice is it gives more room for creativity in practice, because you're not stuck in this means this and I have to practice it like this. You get the sense of, this is the sense of the practice. Let me feel my own way into it.
Yes, because I think a lot of people do get very sort of train tracked into this particular way, and it has to be done like precisely like this because there's no other way, and that becomes all very stifling and a very rigid in that method, right?
Yeah,
Mm.
exactly.
Mm.
Exactly.
Yeah, so it kind of reminded me a little bit of Chinese. I mean, I don't really know too much Chinese, but I know a little bit of Japanese. And when you read it, using the kanji and the symbols and things, often the meaning can be very, very diverse and multi-layered as well.
Yeah, it's exactly the same thing, and you see that in the old Chinese poetry. I mean, my Chinese isn't good enough to read classical poetry, but I can, see certain words that have quite different meanings depending on the context. And yeah, it's the same thing with Pali and Sanskrit.
Exactly right. Yeah. So okay, so in those kind of multiple directions that your life has taken, do you think you could say at what point did you recognise that encountering people we find difficult is actually not just something we need to just avoid and it's just a nasty thing. Actually, it's something we can hold very dear and valuable and learn a great deal from. Could you get a sense of when that might have arisen?
Yeah, that was, I would say I was in my 40s, and I was starting to really seriously practice nonviolent communication and practicing this kind of translation from this whole language of, being triggered and reacting from the trigger, and interacting at that trigger level and the strategy level, to understanding or trying to understand what's the deeper thing underneath. And the one that really clicked in, it's kind of a funny example because it was with my dog, right?
Mm.
Who,
Right.
who was a collie. And if ever, anyone who's had a collie will know that these dogs are like as intelligent as toddlers. They're absolutely incredible.
Yes.
And I had a collie that was like Lassie, I tell you. Um, and one night I was up particularly late, let him out, before we went to bed just to do his business, and he wouldn't come back in. He decided it was time to play. And I was just, getting all upset about it, and, went and picked him up and brought him into the house. And I heard myself say, I need you to do what I tell you to do. I really heard myself say that.
Mm.
And in that moment, I thought, oh, what is his need? what's the need that was driving his behavior? And I thought, somehow it just clicked in. He needs choice. He doesn't want to be told what to do. It wasn't about, I want to play. He was saying, I want to make my own decisions. And after that, I always gave him a choice on a path. Do you want to walk this way? Do you want to walk this way? For a toy, do you want this toy? Do you want that toy? And overnight, his quote unquote misbehaviors improved dramatically
Oh wow.
because he was given choices. He had some power in his world. So those are very important, fundamental. Marshall Rosenberg with MVC calls them human needs, but I would say that they're needs that all intelligent mammals share. My dog certainly seemed to have that need for choice and power in his world, and it had a huge impact. So that was such a clear example. That became kind of a touchstone then for relating with people and understanding, okay, any behavior that I'm triggered by, okay, I've got my own set of underlying, the feelings and underlying needs, and so do they. And maybe the trick is not, sometimes it's to look at my own feelings and needs and work on that side, but sometimes it's stepping into their shoes. And maybe I can go a significant distance in helping meet their need, and through that really improve their relationship.
I mean, resonates very strongly with where I'm at right now. We actually have a toddler. There are many situations where I can recognize how I have a tendency to impose my own wish on what he wants. And sometimes it's kind of, you need to direct where he's at and things, but sometimes it's just, I don't know, like out of a sense of I know best, and actually just kind of thinking of an example, I suppose. Oh, come and have a hug. Oh, come and have a hug with daddy. Come and have and then he's a bit, maybe he's just like, doesn't want to come, or he's a bit resistant. And I have to stop and think, who wants a hug here? I mean, I think I want a hug, and he's not in the right place for giving a hug right now. And I could force it and get myself a hug because I'm a big, I'm the parent and things. But that's not what the relationship's about. And I can just catch myself in so many different situations like that where he's not able to vocalize his wishes as much as I can. So then we override, don't we? It's so easy.
Yeah. And it's easy to go in what in the parlance of nonviolent communication is a demand. It's easy to go into that without realizing it. And what's a demand? Well, if it's not a demand, it's a request. And a real request, is when you're equally able to hear yes or no for an answer. It doesn't mean you'll be equally happy with a yes or no. But if your toddler says, yes, daddy, I'm happy to give you a hug, through his actions, you're happy about that. And if he says no, then for you, that's just information. And then maybe that goes a different direction. I'm hearing you don't want to give me a hug. Is it a hard day, or do you want to do something else? It just goes a different direction. But
that's right.
The request, and at the end of your book, I was reading through. You've got kind of these categories of things we do, and it struck me that the letting go is very similar to moving from a demand to a request. And you put this thing out there, but you let go of the demand. You let go of the expectation that the other person's going to do what you want. You're just putting it out as, this would make, I love to feel connected with you. I would love a hug. Is that something that you're willing to do?
That's right. And then you can just freely let go of that wish when it doesn't get reciprocated. Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. And then when you say what need is being met by doing it, that's very connecting for the other person. I can remember being in a venue, and it's kind of a long story, but my hands were occupied, and I needed something to be moved. And I saw this little boy, and I asked him, would you move this over to that other table? And he looked at me, and he wasn't saying yes, and he wasn't saying no, but he wasn't sure. And I just said, it would really help me And his face brightened, and he just picked it up and went over. And you
Mm,
see, the difference was that he understood that that was meeting this need in me, and we actually take great joy in meeting each other's underlying fundamental human needs.
mm, mm, mm. Yeah, if we can express them sufficiently, like wisely, so that so it doesn't look like a demand. We just simply express our need in an open way. It seems to
Yeah.
me.
Yeah,
Mm,
I'm really needing some help here. Would you be willing to do this? And if
mm,
they say no, well, then you're looking for another strategy. But you're
mm,
letting them know this. I could really use some help. This would be
mm,
a great support.
mm, mm,
And when I was listening to the podcasts, some of the past podcasts, and reading the book ahead of time, and I kept hearing the phrase "troublesome Buddha,"
mm,
and and what kept coming to mind was enemy images from nonviolent communication. And what happens is when we have an image of someone or a group as an enemy, what we're doing is we're losing connection with the fact that they have the same underlying human needs as we do. We're much more alike than we are different. We all share needs for independence and love and support and creativity and safety and all these things. But when we put an enemy image on someone, it's like we strip them of the
mm,
truth of those
mm.
underlying needs. Yeah. And then bringing back those needs is part of the process of dissolving those enemy images. And
Yeah,
we may never agree on strategies. My goodness, you see that in the Middle East right now. Everyone wants peace and safety and security, and the strategies vary vastly. But
yeah,
at the end of the day, people want their homes, they want safety, they want security. It's just
mm,
the strategies are vastly different. And
mm,
then when we deny the humanity of the other side, we're kind of saying we're over focusing on our own need and not truly connecting with their need.
mm, mm. And again, it's just one of those very, very easy things to do, isn't it? Where we encounter someone who's difficult, and then if we don't acknowledge their humanity and their own needs, then we feel justified in bad behavior. Not bad, but I mean um, uh,
In
behavior
in
that causes
in
more
behavior
suffering.
in behaviors that are tragic expressions of unmet needs.
Right, right. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah.
And the
Mm,
dynamic you're talking about there of, feeling justified, that gets amplified when there are others around us who share the same enemy image. Then it's like we're
mm,
supporting each other
mm,
in that dehumanization of the
yeah.
other, denying the underlying
Mm,
universal human needs of the other.
mm, mm.
Yeah, there can be this kind of juice when people are in that together. Yeah.
That's right. That's right. I feel like my worldview is accepted when I meet someone else who's also got a similar worldview. So I was wondering how. So we've got these kind of more like theoretical strategies, if you say, and like maybe like intellectual understanding about how relationships go and what's helpful and what's not. In terms of so you talked about like putting into practice some of this NVC stuff, and then the right speech and right action. So, I mean, maybe do you have some examples or some comments about how that has happened for you in terms of like real life applications?
Yeah, yeah, there are a couple of examples that come to mind, and there's another one that, just like with the dog, that was highlighting the power of choice. There's
Mm.
another one that highlights the power of choice, and this was with a little girl. And I just love examples with animals and kids because they're so clear.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Mm.
so I was living in a courtyard setting, so lots of neighbors, and one day I heard this little girl who lived in the courtyard. She was screaming, and oh, right. I was outside. I was coming around a corner, and I heard her screaming. It's like, what is going on? I came around the corner, and there was a dog who didn't live in the courtyard. I don't know where he came from, but he was just nose to nose with this little girl, and he was huge. He was as tall as she was, and she was terrified. The dog wasn't doing anything, but she was terrified.
Mm.
And so I just scooped her up, and my mind went to, oh, is that big bad dog scaring you? And I thought, no, this is just a dog doing a dog thing. That creates in her an enemy image of dogs that may last her whole.
Mm.
So that this just kind of flashed up, starting to say, did that big bad dog scare you? Stop myself. And I just went to a feeling and need. Are you feeling scared and you want to be safe? Yes, yes, yes. I
Mm.
just, all I needed to do was repeat that. Oh, as you really want to be safe, you're really feeling scared. And it would have been so easy to go to this enemy image of the dog. But
Mm.
all she really wanted was to feel safe. And after a while, do you want to, do you want me to put you down? No, no. You're really feeling scared. Yeah, it was
Mm.
so connecting. And after
Mm.
that, that little girl was like my best friend. Yeah, it was like a glue, and it was so simple.
So something very, very powerful about um, expressing what other people's I don't know what's the right word. It's like I'm helping the other person, especially with kids, right? I'm helping the child to identify what they're feeling by sort of verbalizing it on their behalf. Is
Yeah.
that is that something like that?
Absolutely. It helps them verbalize. And this is equally true of adults because
Mm.
we're so generally out of tune with our
Yeah.
emotions, in our culture at least. I always say we start with a working vocabulary of about 10 emotions,
Yes,
hungry,
exactly.
sad,
Mm.
tired, and frustrated,
Mm.
angry, and then a few more of your choice. And we recognize a lot more, but in terms of working vocabulary, we
Mm.
just don't have it.
Mm.
So yeah, very helpful to help kids identify, but also adults. I mean, I started this work with feelings lists, and I would look down the list. What am I feeling? For
Mm.
just to develop that
Yeah.
vocabulary.
That what do they call it? Like granularity in our emotional intelligence, like being able to distinguish the fine differences between feeling like that or feeling a little bit more like this. Mm-hmm.
That's right. That's right. And the finer you can get it, the more it kind of lands in your
Mm.
body. And when you start naming an emotion, you start bringing in different parts of the brain, and just naming it helps reduce the intensity. So if you
Mm.
can name it really precisely, there's kind of this sense of relief. But then
Mm.
even more powerful is if you can connect that with the need that's not being met, or
Yeah,
sometimes it is being met, that's generating a feeling, because the feelings can
that's
be
it.
positive or negative. So
Mm. Mm.
the image to think of is that the feelings are like lights on a dashboard, right? And we go around with the dashboard covered. Don't want to see the lights on the dashboard. So the first thing is, what are the lights? But then the feelings aren't there just to have feelings there. The feelings are they're there for a reason. And actually, I should say here in a Buddhist context, I'm not talking about feeling like Vedana, pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral.
Mm.
I'm talking about it more in the chitta, in the mind context, where it's a construct of the mind and heart. Yeah,
Mm. Well, that's right. So it's so interesting, isn't it? I mean, in the Chinese and Japanese, they have this word shin, which often gets used in translation of the word chitta. In my experience, I mean, and Shin is more of a kind of heart mind blend, ambiguity, something in between, isn't it?
yeah.
And in
Chitta's
English,
the
when
same.
we have to choose in English, is it the heart or the mind? Is it the body or is it the brain? It's kind of weird how it's
Yeah.
not both. And it's not one or the other. It's somewhere in between. Mm.
Yeah, and sometimes you do see people using heart mind, having
Mm.
it hyphen, trying to capture that sense of chitta in Pali, or shin in Chinese,
Mm.
or is it shin in Japanese as
It's
well?
also the same. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So
Mm.
anyway, the feelings are there because there's one of those underlying universal human needs that is not being met, or sometimes is being met. And that's the really important thing. That's like, the light on your dashboard, it's telling you something that's going on in the engine, and you want to find out what's going on in the engine and fix that. The feelings are coming up because there's something going on in the needs. That's where the power is to figure out what need or needs aren't being met, and then what can take you just one little step to help meet one of those needs.
Yes, and that very much takes our perspective out of just our own little self into seeing the broader perspective of that there's me and my needs, but there's also the other people in this interaction and their needs. Because I think we can get very closed down, isn't it? Especially when things are really hard and lots of frustration or anger or kind of resentment or whatever it is that's arising. It closes us down so quickly, doesn't it?
Right. That's exactly what was happening with the dog. You can't be out there. You might start barking. It's 11:30 at night. You're going to wake up all the neighbors. This is not acceptable. You get back in here right now. It was that dynamic. Yeah. And it wasn't until I heard that kind of harshness in my voice.
Oh, this not the dog with the little girl, but your dog going out in the nighttime.
Collie story.
Yeah.
The hearing, you need to do what I tell you to do, hearing that. And then this whole world opened up of, oh, wait a minute, his needs, what's going on there? Because rarely is someone, it's like there's no need that's going to be met with the strategy of, I'm going to make this person's life terrible.
Yeah.
I mean, someone's trying to get to, I don't know, fairness or support, and maybe, them doing something that you think is just them trying to get at, push your buttons. That's a strategy that at the end of the day, for them, there's a need, there's a positive underlying need that's driving that.
Yeah. Just you saying that reminds me of times when, myself and my sister would, press each other's buttons, and just it almost like the definition of siblings is someone who knows exactly how to get in there and press all your buttons really well. But I think, yeah, exactly. So when you, from that perspective, you see that actually it's the behavior is always being driven by an underlying sense of, I want to be recognized, or I want to play, or there's something else, isn't there?
Yeah, or you did something to me, now I want to do something to you. That's a sense of fairness. Yeah, wanting things to be fair, or this is how I know to connect with you. So it's about connection. Yeah. So I mean, needs are the strategies we use to try to meet needs. They don't always work. Sometimes they create a lot of suffering, but the need underneath is positive and universal. It's the strategies where we start to get kind of off track. So, real world examples. There was another one I wanted to bring in of a neighbor who was getting really kind of aggressive towards me. And I mean, this is not normal in my life. I'd never had that before. And I was trying all kinds of things to try to diffuse the situation. And I can remember one time he actually was yelling in my face. I'd never had that in my life. And, my whole system was just kind of like, oh my God, what do I do here? What do I do? But because I was so into the nonviolent communication, there was also a part of me going, well, he's got a need, but I don't know what it is. And it was just like, what's your need? What's your need? And, I never could figure out an answer to that question, but being able to have that loop in my mind of, what's the need here, rather than, this is unacceptable behavior and I'm going to, call the police or whatnot. It didn't go there. It was just, he has some need that's really important to him, that's causing him to yell in my face, and I have no idea what it is. And this was a very important kind of thing for me, because the situation lasted for months, and I tried all kinds of things. And one of the things that I did is I got this beautiful Guanyin statue and put it outside my door. And one night I had one of those really vivid dreams that the Guanyin statue was shattered in thousands of pieces in the courtyard. And it was so vivid that I got up and I looked, is it really destroyed? But no, she was fine. But in that moment, I just knew there are some situations that are just unfixable.
Ah,
Yeah. And what that allowed me to do was let go of this. If I were just a better practitioner, if I were
ah,
just better at nonviolent communication, surely there's a way to work through this. And that really helped me let go of that strategy. I mean, the
right.
need was clearly peace. And I was wanting peace through making peace with the neighbor to get peace in the courtyard. And all just in a moment, it's like, no, that's just not going to happen.
Ah,
So I ended up getting peace by moving away, literally moving house. And I
mm,
found out about 6 months later from someone else who lived in that place that he'd just been diagnosed with a brain tumor.
ah,
That is what had been causing the changes in the behavior.
ah, yeah.
It's just totally
Mm,
unfixable. But
right.
being able, two things really important there. One is that in the thick of it, when it would have been so easy to go to that enemy image, it was just, what's his need? He's got a
Yeah.
need. I can't figure it out. And then the other was letting go of that pressure on myself. If I were just a better practitioner, I could do this. Could just let go of that.
Mm, mm. That's such an interesting example. I think so. So to me, it seems the practice in that is to bring to mind and keep in mind this view of what is the need in the situation, because I think when the temperature rises in the situation, in the encounter, in the difficulty, it can be very, we all have a sort of threshold where we just disconnect. We can't maintain that awareness, and we we default back to old behaviors, whatever. So the practice is to just keep coming back to that. What is the need? What is your need? What is the need of the situation?
Yeah,
Mm,
that's right. And one of my nonviolent communication teachers, she used to say, whatever it is, it's just a feeling and a need.
mm,
And I find that so helpful that however
mm,
heated things are getting, however complicated, at the end of the day, it's just each person has a feeling and a need.
mm,
What is it? And yeah, sometimes we need to just calm down, take a few minutes or a day or whatever. We need some space, and then we can, okay, what is it? What's the feeling? What's the need? And I can remember doing an intensive training with Marshall Rosenberg, who started nonviolent communication,
mm.
and I took great encouragement from the fact that he said that he still well, he's passed away now, but at the time of the training, he said, I still get triggered. He said,
Yeah.
what changes, or what has changed, is the amount of time that it takes to like recover from that.
Mm,
Yeah.
mm,
So, you start out this work and it maybe you get so triggered, and then 2 days later you're talking to a friend and you're working through, what's the feeling and need. But as time goes on, that space becomes shorter and shorter and shorter until, sometimes you can just kind of take a deep breath. Okay, I'm feeling agitation. What's my need? Oh yeah, I'm needing some help here.
mm, mm.
It's not always that fast, but it can be that fast. And that's
And
what changes over time is that kind of lag
mm.
between when there's the trigger and when you can actually identify in a calmer way the feeling and the need.
In the book, maybe I would talk about this in terms of regulating. When we've gone out of regulation, we've gone a bit hot-headed or something, impulsive, and then we're able to come back into that present moment awareness and stability. Mm,
Yeah, exactly.
mm,
So, if we're talking about quote unquote troublesome Buddhas, at the end of the day, we're talking about what's triggering us.
mm,
So
mm,
then, what you're calling the emotional regulation, what I'm calling, the time lag to connecting to feelings and needs, that becomes really, really important. And the sooner we can do that, the sooner we stop seeing the enemy image and we can start seeing another human being who maybe has very different strategies. Maybe they have a very different need that's quite active, but we see them as another being that that whose needs matter as much as ours do.
Absolutely, 100%. Yeah. And so then, in which case, that brings me on just to the last question. I mean, how would you say that relates to seeing people's Buddha nature? I mean, if that's a phrase that would resonate with you.
Um, I, I think my answer to that question is that it helps us be present with what is. Yeah, Marshall used to talk about surfing the wave, right? It's like, a dance of feelings, and you're in the present with what's actually arising right now. Not the story about what
Yeah.
happened, not our projection of what's going to happen, but what's the feeling and the need that's arising from this being right now. I mean, we're all just processes unfolding. So it's then it's like this becomes a tool for keeping our attention on the now, where the unfolding is happening, which also happens to be the only place where we have power to shift it.
Yeah.
But as I understand it, the what we call the Buddha nature, or we're basically talking about right here, right now, and this language is a great tool to help us to support us in being right here, right now.
Well, that is an absolutely wonderful place to finish. I think that's a great encapsulation of it all. I think, yeah. So, I mean, thank you so much for offering. It has been a different perspective, but a very, very lovely perspective on how we approach and process and interact, and come to terms with difficult people, and make that a very beautiful and a process for learning and becoming a better person. So thank you so much for bringing all that and your experience.
And thank you for having the space to talk about it. And I've really, really enjoyed the conversation and your great questions.
If you've enjoyed this podcast, please leave a review and a star rating on whatever platform you use. And do recommend it to others, because we all meet difficult people, and each of those meetings presents an opportunity for learning and growth. I also have a downloadable video course in how to deal with difficult people. Head over to my website for more information, markwestmaquette.co.uk. Thanks for listening.